One Piece is still on break, and the fandom just keeps getting worse and worse and worse day by day. No content from Oda is seemingly leaving the entire community in shambles, but it is also giving me way more views and traction on my videos, so why not just pump out more of them? So now that I had just finished rereading Act 2 of Wano, I must say I'm very, indifferent towards this part of the story. I'm not saying it's bad by any means, but a lot of my problems with Wano that I had first thought was only an Act 3 thing actually starts becoming prominent in this section of the arc. It's also incredibly hard to reread these parts of the arc considering how much of it is just build up for the third act, and well, I'll get to that in the next video. But my feelings toward Act 3 certainly have left a more bitter taste in my mouth when it comes to rereading all the setup in this arc. So before I get to my gripes, and of course my praises, let's continue our not so quick recaps. Which will be pretty difficult because not only is this like double the length of Act 1, there's like 6 different plot threads that are going on here that only build up even more subplots, so bear with me on this one. So picking up after where Act 1 left off, Ashura Doji and Dog, yes, I'm calling him Dog, I'm not going to get bullied for mispronouncing his name, get into a bit of a skirmish as Kinemon tries to recruit him, but he refuses as he only swears loyalty to Odin, who's long dead now. We switch over to the Flower Capital where people begin receiving Kinemon's messages and understanding them, while over there, Sanji, now reunited with Frankie, Usopp, and Robin at a soba shop where Sanji sells food to the people, Kyoshiro's men try to get the money from him, which he refuses, causing a scene as they knock a little girl's soba away, and Sanji beats up 2 of the men while the 3rd runs away because of it. Sanji gives this little girl another bowl of food again, which is where we're introduced to Otoko. This little girl who for some reason can't stop smiling and laughing no matter what, even while eating. Surely just a cute little trait and not something horrific waiting to be revealed, right? The 3rd man that ran away goes back to Kyoshiro and informs him about the soba cook that beat him up, so he requests for Queen to send more skilled fighters after him, leading to X-Drake and Page 1 showing up at the Flower Capital. Otoko and Robin accompany a woman by the name of Komurasaki on the way to Shogun Orochi's banquet, Komurasaki being referred to as the highest class and most beautiful woman in the whole land of Wano. She's a cold-hearted woman who uses poor men's desperation and her own charm to get whatever she wants out of them. And at the same time as this, Momonosuke talks to Tama about his sister Hiyori, who at this point in time would be a grown woman in her mid-20s. Gee, I wonder who this could be. Certainly not the person we put so much emphasis on in just the page before this. We're introduced to Shogun Orochi in a meeting between him and CP0 about a weapons arrangement, and he orders to be brought Dr. Vegapunk, using the power of Kaido behind him as a threat to the government if he doesn't get what he wants. He then goes to his banquet, intended by Komurasaki, but Robin goes off on her own looking for scriptures and the poneglyph, but she's immediately caught by the Oniwa Banshu, a large group of ninjas led by Fukurokuju. Who's that? Who cares? They try to capture her, but she gets away and attends Orochi again. Some comments about avenging his people from Kyoshiro triggers Orochi's paranoia, and a scene breaks out as Tama can't stop herself from laughing, causing Orochi to get furious and order for her death. Robin isn't having that though and takes her, quickly running out and escaping with the help of Shinobu, Nami, and Brook. Komurasaki stands in Orochi's way and stands up to him, helping Otoko escape as well. She defies him and refuses to ask for forgiveness, and as punishment for this crime of disrespecting the Shogun, Kyoshiro draws his blade and cuts her down, presumably killing Wano's highest of class. Orochi is infuriated by her death and orders for the hunt and killing of the little girl. Back in the Flower Capital, X-Drake and Page 1 go on the look for Soba Cook, and after terrorizing some of the citizens, he ultimately shows himself and starts fighting them, despite law warning him not to. Despite his resentment towards his family, Sanji transforms with the Germa technology into Stealth Black, giving him the abilities to pretty much turn invisible, and he defeats Page 1 off-screen while Law gets Frankie and Usopp out of the area. With those subplots on hold, we go over to Zoro, wandering through Wano with a man by the name of Tono Yasuie, Ebisu, an old man who's smiling at all times. I wonder what this could be connected to. He takes Zoro to Ebisu town, a poverty-stricken village with little food and water to go around, but despite all of that, the villagers never stop laughing and smiling. I wonder what this could be connected to. Okay, I'll stop. Zoro is welcomed by the people and eventually grows quite fond of them, sharing a quick, warm moment with the people before ultimately leaving as he has to find Yasuie, which was taken from him by a bandit. We learned through Brook back at a cemetery that there was a poneglyph in Orochi's castle, and that a road poneglyph was likely on Onigashima. We get some dialogue of a former Yakuza boss by the name of Hyogoro, which is where we finally set the grounds to talk about Luffy and Udon. In Udon prison, Luffy and Eustace Kid are constantly competing with each other to see who's truly the better of the two. They get rewarded for their prison work with lots of food, and Luffy befriends an old man by the name of Hyo, who, spoiler alert, turns out to be this former Yakuza boss Hyogoro. Hyo is a bit of a weak man though, way past his prime and unable to do a lot of the heavy prison work, so Luffy helps him out and gives him meal tickets. But the guards aren't too fond of this though, and try to start attacking him for it. But Luffy isn't having it and deals with them himself, protecting Hyogoro. This only makes things worse though, as Queen the Plague gets involved, Kaido's second commander and the man who looks after the prisoners of Udon. We also figure out here that, hey, Caribou still exists. For, reasons. And Kid has lost his arm in battle against red-haired Shanks in a skirmish that happened quite a while ago, as well as him having a big conflict with Big Mom's crew at some point in the past too. Of course, without the powers of his devil fruit because of his sea stone cuffs, Luffy can't do much to escape, and it only gets worse when he actually loses these handcuffs because Queen then puts a device on him and Hyogoro that'll kill them instantly if they try to escape. So their only real way of dealing with this is taking part in Queen's tag team sumo fights. Raizo's also here, spying on the area to try and break Luffy out of the prison, where he ends up reuniting with an imprisoned comrade by the name of Kawamatsu, one of the other 9 scabbards. We also learned that Hyogoro is not actually that weak after all and is still a pretty skilled hockey user, more advanced than Luffy in fact. So with this, he decides to teach Luffy Ryuo, Wano's form of armament hockey that values penetrating the opponent from the inside and destroying them from there. Luffy wants to master this ability and trains with it for the rest of Udon as he believes it'll be the key for him to be able to take down Kaido once and for all. We then learn through Kaido that Big Mom is on her way to Wano, but no need to worry about one of the strongest pirates in the world coming your way. King the Wildfire is here to fix it all himself, kicking the Big Mom pirate ship right off the waterfall and sending Big Mom into a whirlpool, where she washes up on the shore and is found by Kiku, Chopper, Tama, and Momo. Not exactly someone you want to find on the shore, especially after, you kind of fucked up her own island, but hey, it's perfectly okay. She's not going to hurt them. Why? Because she has amnesia. You see, I try not to get into critical detail like really hard before getting to the review section, but my god, this is just something that annoys the hell out of me. There's a good reason why amnesia plot threads are considered a don't in storytelling. They're often lazy and unnecessary, and they really pull you out of a story and away from a character. They're usually only used as plot devices, and I mean, it worked with Sabo because it actually did something for his character and added to his trauma, but with Big Mom it's incredibly unnecessary here. It only happens because the plot somewhat requires it to get everyone back together later on. But even then, you could easily think of better ways to do it than something like this, and especially with one of your central antagonists that has been in the story for a while now. If you can't tell, I'm not exactly fond of Big Mom and her portrayal in the story, but I'll get into that more later. So they end up using Big Mom, or I guess Olin now, to go to Udon and help break Luffy out. We then go back to Sanji, Usopp, Frankie, and La, who make it to Ebisu town and meet Yasui, who tells them that they had just missed Zoro. Meanwhile, the girls are all at a bathhouse, which ends up being infiltrated by X-Drake and Hawkins. They plan on seeing all their legs and taking out any of them that have the crescent moon marking on them, but they're all ultimately saved by Sanji, who is spying on them and peeping on their bodies with the help of the raid suit and its invisibility. We also find out that Law's crewmates have been captured, and since Shinobu doesn't really want to help free them, Law goes out on his own, getting his crew rescued in exchange for his own capture, but now without a trick up his sleeve. Zoro finds the man who took Yasuie, a bridge bandit by the name of Yukimaru. He gets into a fight with him but pauses it to help a woman carrying Otoko and running from the killer, Kamazou, working under Orochi with a hysterical and terrifying laugh and smile. Zoro fights him, but the bridge bandit interrupts and gets Zoro impaled by Kamazou, but that means nothing to a fucking kick-ass badass like Zoro, so he sucks it up and takes the scythe and uses it to take Kamazou out like the fucking awesome character he is. He rescues Hiyori but passes out due to his injuries and food poisoning, but he wakes up a bit later and is all bandaged up, healing from his battle as Komurasaki helped him. This reveals that she's still alive and isn't actually the cold-hearted manipulator, but is actually Hiyori, Momonosuke's sister, because that wasn't obvious enough. We also learn about Hiyori's relationship with Kawamatsu, learning that he practically raised her after Oden's death, Toki's death, and Momonosuke's disappearance. Orochi ended up finding out about these secret messages from Kinemon, and Yasuie came up with his own to tell Kinemon, though no one actually really knows who Yasuie is. He's just seen as the saint of Ebisu town, a man that helps others, offers food and money to those in need despite his own lack of such things, and does his best to keep the poverty-stricken land upbeat and cheerful. We also find out here that Yasuie is actually Toko's father, who hasn't seen her in quite a bit. Fukurokuju identifies him as Ushimitsu Kozo, a fantasy-like thief who took from the rich and gave back to the poor, and Orochi demands for his crucifixion and execution, putting Yasuie on a death timer. Brook finds Zoro, Hiyori, and Toko in the shack in the snow and learns about Yasuie's execution, causing Toko to panic and run to town. We learn here that Yasuie was actually a well-respected man in Wano, a man of the Shimotsuki clan, and one that was good friends with Oden after his banishment. We see him beaten up and strapped to a bamboo high up, watched by everyone in the entire flower capital. Different parties of the Alliance are gathered here to watch this, as Yasuie reveals in a triumphant yet bittersweet speech that he was not Kozo after all, and only said he was so he could get a public execution. He refutes Orochi in all of his actions, scorning and insulting him in front of everyone as the people of Ebisu and Wano watch in shock and sorrow. He tells more lies, such as him creating Kinemon's message as just a prank, and as well as the crescent moon simply being a trend that he started in order to get Orochi's men to be less trusting of their shogun. They start to doubt him, as many of the people they imprisoned they now believe were just completely innocent people that were just following a trend. At this point, he was just beating his dead self, but it's more than enough to help the Alliance greatly, even if at the cost of his own life. Orochi is infuriated at this and guns him down, killing him for good as Toko breaks into the circle and sees her dead father up close. The people of Ebisu town are laughing in tears, still smiling, even Toko. Zoro gets infuriated at this and almost causes a scene, but is stopped by Hiyori, who reveals to him that they can't ever show any emotional expressions aside from laughing and smiling. Why? Because Orochi fed them the smile fruits, which its side effects take away all of your non-happy emotions, creating a morbid and tragic scene as the people of Ebisu and the daughter of a now deceased man cries in laughter at loud volumes after the murder of their most beloved figure. Orochi sees Toko and tries to gun her down, but is stopped by the now reunion of Zoro and Sanji, rescuing Toko and getting Hiyori out of the area. But not until after Zoro attempts to kill Orochi, only being stopped by Kyoshiro. This is a brilliant moment and one of my favorite parts of all of One Piece. It's one of the darkest scenes of the series and one that creates unbelievably high tension that had been missing from a lot of the arcs so far. It's beautifully drawn, tragic, and heartbreaking. And I can't explain enough how the people of Wano are just handled so well in this part of the story. And while I say that here, that's sadly not something I can really say about the later parts of this arc. But without getting into that, because we're in a positive note right here, I really love this moment for the series. It's one of the highest highs in all of One Piece. I love this moment so much. So now going away from the peak One Piece content, we head back to Udon, where Luffy is still training and fighting off Queen's men. Kid is recaptured captured with Kamazou the Killer, where we're then revealed to the twist that Kamazou is actually Killer, Kid's right-hand man, who was captured and tortured by Kaido after their defeat in Dressrosa. He was given a smile fruit by Orochi that ended up only giving him the bad side effects, only allowing him to express a laugh that he despised so much. Later on, Big Mom ends up crashing into Udon with Luffy being reunited with Kiku. Him, Raizo, Kawamatsu, and Hyo help each other break out, using Ryuo in the process as Queen fights Big Mom, ending up hitting her head and giving her memory back, which makes Queen shit his pants before she passes out. Okay, I guess. We get some cool battle moments with Luffy and the prisoners of Udon rejoicing and bowing to Momonosuke, the symbol for all their hope in this battle, even though Momo really believes that he's simply just in the shadow of his father. But this is enough to get them on the side of the Alliance, so with all these subplots out of the way, everyone is reunited back on the mountain. Ashura ends up joining the Alliance, Law beats Hawkins and tries to get information out of him, Zoro meets Kawamatsu as he and Hiyori entrust him with Odin's blade known as Enma, the only sword that has ever cut Kaido. We also get a bit of a dialogue moment where he vows to avenge Yasuie, which we'll get into later. But anyways, he's entrusted to Enma, but it's wildly draining his Taki and he needs to tame it like a wild animal. Luffy trains his Ryo abilities for the upcoming raid in the next week, and 7 of the 9 scabbards take off for the raid while Frankie and many other men build ships for the battle. Big Mom is then taken to Kaido, where they have a big fight but ultimately come to an agreement on an alliance to take over the world, find the One Piece, and then finish their death battle. And yeah, that's Wano Act 2. Jesus Christ, that was long. So I explained in my first Wano review that many of my issues come later on in the arc, and that's where we get to Act 2. And now I'm not saying this act is necessarily bad, but I do have my fair share of criticisms, because I don't think it's great either. It has been a while since I read Act 2 or just Wano in general, and I'm starting to realize why it took me so long to reread this stuff. However, before we get into my criticisms, I'll get into my positives first, and while I don't exactly have a list for these things, the positives outweigh the negatives in my opinion. And so I still think it's a serviceable midpoint for the arc and definitely isn't a sign of things to come. Kinda. My first praise has to be the whole Zoro subplot. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't pretty biased to Zoro because, I mean, I am. He's a fun character, what can I say? And he was handled amazingly in Act 2. He grows a real relationship with a lot of the people in Wano, which is perfect for his character. This is the perfect arc to have him building a relationship with people in an island. The setup for him here is done very well, both power-wise and narrative-wise. His connection with Yasuie, Hiyori, and Otoko makes his future actions exciting to anticipate. At least before we get to that part. The fight between him and Killer was also very fun, and speaking of Killer, his tragic story in this arc, while short, was done very well. Killer isn't exactly someone we really know that well, but the twist of the fruits being connected to him and Kid makes their whole crew's story very tragic and builds up well to their planned revenge on Kaido. Kinda. Pretty cool content to see, you know, back when Kid was actually a respectable character and not the biggest loser in the entire series, but you know what, moving on. Yasuie's death and the smile reveal is probably the darkest that One Piece could ever get when it comes to its twists and reveals. I mean, hell, they drugged fucking kids and removed all of their ability to feel emotions. This just makes their reaction to the death of a beloved man being nothing but laughter over pain incredibly tragic and morbid. Otoko's reaction especially is heartbreaking and hard to look at. In all honesty, it's an amazing villainous moment for a side villain of all things. I mean, hell, where's the stuff like this for Kaido? He isn't even really in this act outside of the end. Some side characters like Hyogoro and Kawamatsu are pretty interesting and promising on introduction, and while whether or not they live up to the promises all up to Act 3, they're handled very well here. And that's pretty much all my praises for this act, so let's get into my criticisms now. Alright, for one, Ryo, wait, no, that's for Act 3. Okay, Avenging Yasuie, wait, no, that's also Act 3, Jesus. Okay, let's talk about Kaido, that's still Act 3, Jesus fucking Christ. Shh. Okay, going back to the series review, Act 2 starts off incredibly slow to me. The dialogue takes up most of the chapters at times, and it's very slow paced. There's nothing wrong with slow pacing, but when it's not interesting, it's a bit of a drag. It's a big shift in tone and pace from Act 1, which was very action-packed and to the point, and while there was still lots of dialogue in between it still managed to stuff some pretty cool stuff with it to keep your interest going. While as for here, I felt myself getting somewhat bored at times. We're constantly jumping between side plots too, and in some cases they take way too long to establish themselves. It doesn't really help at all that we're only building up to even more side plots and newer characters in these side plots. And that's where I get to my biggest criticism. I think there's way too many characters in this arc, and I'm only talking about 30 chapters into it. I'm not even talking about all the characters that get introduced in Act 3. I mean, at this point you have the Scabbard, Straw Hats, Carrot, Kid, Killer, Law, Shinobu, Hyogoro, the Commanders, Gifters, the Toby Robo, Orochi, Kaido, and now the fucking Big Mom Pirates on top of that. I mean, hell, this much shit going on in the story and this many characters that are supposed to play a big part in the climax only leads to messiness and clutter in most times. It's impossible to make us care for this many people, and in some cases it feels like Oda's trying to force us to care about some of them. And yes, I'm talking about the Scabbards, but wait, I have to wait until Act 3 for that. Oh my god. And while some of them are definitely interesting, the other half of them fall completely flat and are either completely boring or just are very overshadowed by a more interesting character. And it doesn't really help that almost none of them contribute to anything that important this far into it. Nor do we get a lot of moments between any of them to build some sort of chemistry or relationship or empathy for them. They just kind of exist here and share maybe a couple panels here and there. And then when they reunite, they're kind of just there. And hell, I can say that for some of the Straw Hats too. Even this early on, Usopp feels completely out of place in this arc. And speaking of Wano characters, I mean, don't even get me started on Hiyori. When Komurasaki was introduced, she seemed to be what could be a very complex, cold-hearted character with hidden intentions and motives. And while we do get the hidden intentions part, her actual self is way less interesting when she doesn't have the mask on. She's kind of just a cheery, cute, dumb girl who relies on everyone else to help her, even though she was shown to be standing up for herself like pretty early on when we got introduced to her, despite her own weaknesses. But this was back when she was, an actual interesting character. While Zoro obviously isn't a bad guy, her blatantly telling him her entire history and real identity when she just fucking met the guy and didn't know if he was good or not is insanely stupid. And she just continues to act kind of stupid for the rest of the act. While I like her dynamic with Zoro, that part just kind of irks me a lot. And while I know I said I'll try not to get into Act 3 criticisms, this act promises things that simply just don't happen. The whole Ryuo training could have either been completely cut out or at least shortened with less build-up to its importance, as it really doesn't end up being all that important to beating Kaido compared to the other power-ups Luffy gets that completely overshadow it. And those power-ups have almost little to no build-up or training in this arc, despite them being way more central to the actual fight that happens later on. It just feels really weird to have this much emphasis on an ability that feels insignificant compared to the other power-ups we get in the exact same arc. The build-up for what Zoro might do later on in Act 3 makes us believe that this is going to be something big and different for his character. Maybe not just wanting to fight someone. He wants to avenge Yasuie, help the land of the samurai, and assist in his captain taking down Kaido. I don't even think that Zoro killing Kaido would be good for the story. I just feel like Zoro doesn't do as much later on as he was built up to be doing. And that's really not a thing about strength, that's about character. And on to my last, but certainly not the least of my complaints. Big Mom. Just Big Mom as a whole. She has to be one of, if not the stupidest, laziest, and poorly handled villains I've ever seen. Making big, stupid, brute characters is already an annoying trope in itself, but when they're this important to your story, it just starts to feel ridiculous. Everything that we see her do doesn't match up to the impact of what was a pretty solid backstory for her. The amnesia plot when she washed up on the shore was just simply lazy-ass writing to get her back to Udon and Kaido. The story kinda just requires her to do something in a subplot that doesn't even really need to be a thing? Why did she even need to be separated from her crew and lose her memory when basically all that happens is a bunch of stalling and dragging out before she meets Kaido again? There was really no point in this happening, and it ends up not meaning anything later on to justify its existence in the story. Hell, Oda doesn't even really try to hide it. As soon as she gets her memories back, she passes out right after and is just taken straight to Kaido. It was just annoying to read and completely unserious. It's just an awful way to handle one of what's supposed to be your most threatening group of antagonists yet. She's one of the most incompetent characters in the entire story, and it gets harder and harder to believe that she's actually made it this far in her life despite being so insanely dumb. Her character ends up having so little to it, and she's just a big, dumb, and angry brew. I don't think Oda even needs to put all the depth into every single villain he writes, but when they're one of the most feared characters in the world of the story and has been a central antagonist for the last 200 chapters that was built up all the way back in Fishman Island, just to not even be a better antagonist than Senor Pink was, you can probably start seeing why it's a big problem for me for her character to be this fucking dense. Also, speaking of villains, remember when Jack was supposed to be threatening? Yeah, I don't either. He's actually just the butt of a joke to his two cooler teammates. Because forget about Zoe when he was actually portrayed as a threat, now he's just fodder. But even with all those criticisms, I still fairly enjoy Wano Act 2, even if it kinda leaves a bitter taste in my mouth now that Act 3 has already happened. And that mostly does it for my review here. And this was way longer than I had expected this to be. Wait. How long is Act 3 again? Oh, fuck. But with all that out of the way, that does it for my Wano Act 2 review.